It's a thought that makes your skin crawl. The person who is supposed to protect you could be the one hunting you. The uniform, that means safety, could be a disguise for a monster. For over a decade, this was the shadow hanging over the Long Island serial killer case. It was more than a wild theory whispered on internet forums. It was a serious possibility considered by investigators, journalists, and the families of the dead. The idea that the killer, or killers, might be a police officer was a profiler's nightmare. Because if it was true, the game was rigged from the start. The story begins with a disappearance. Shannon Gilbert, a young woman working as an escort, vanished in the early morning hours of May 1st, 2010. She made a frantic 911 call from a gated community in Oak Beach, Long Island. She was terrified. She said someone was after her. Then the line went dead. The search for Shannon led police to a desolate stretch of road called Ocean Parkway. It's a thin ribbon of asphalt separating the Great South Bay from the Atlantic Ocean. In the winter, it's bleak. Wind-whipped thicket and poison ivy cover the dunes. It's the kind of place you drive through not to. A police officer and his canine partner were training in the area that December. The dog, a German Shepherd, picked up a scent. It led them to a set of human remains wrapped in weathered burlap. It wasn't Shannon. It was another woman, Melissa Barthelemy. She had been missing for over a year. A few days later, police found 3 more bodies nearby, all in similar burlap sacks. They were Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Megan Waterman, and Amberlynn Costello. All 4 women were petite, all worked as escorts, advertising on Craigslist. They became known as the Gilgo Four. The discovery opened a Pandora's box. The search expanded. Over the next few months, more human remains were found scattered along Ocean Parkway. A female toddler, an Asian man, a woman whose skull was found on Gilgo Beach, and whose feet were found miles away on Fire Island. The body count grew. It was clear this was the work of one or more serial killers who had been using the lonely stretch of beach as a dumping ground for years, maybe decades. But the killer of the Gilgo Four seemed different. He was methodical, he was organized. He was what profilers call a disciplined killer. He chose his victims carefully. They were vulnerable. They were women whose disappearance might not be immediately reported. He used their own burner phones to contact them. He met them, killed them, and disposed of their bodies in a way that maximized decomposition and minimized discovery. He was careful, he was smart, and he was arrogant. The arrogance is key. After he killed Melissa Barthelemy, he used her phone to taunt her teenage sister. He made a series of short, cruel calls. He knew her name, he knew she was a whore. The calls were always under 3 minutes. This suggested he knew something about police procedure. He knew that it takes longer than 3 minutes for police to triangulate a phone's location. Who knows that? Cops know that. Criminals who have been caught before know that. Or someone who is just a fan of crime shows. But the precision of it felt professional. It felt like someone who didn't just watch it on TV, but lived it. This was the first seed of the police officer theory. The killer seemed to understand how investigations work. He knew how to stay a step ahead. He chose a dumping ground that was remote but accessible, a place someone could get to, do their work, and leave without being seen. A place that might even be on a regular patrol route. Someone could be there for a legitimate reason. A cop checking on a deserted beach late at night wouldn't raise any alarms. The theory gained more traction when you considered the killer's ability to control his victims. How does a man get a woman, who is already in a high-risk profession and likely on her guard, to go with him to a secluded place? A uniform helps. A badge conveys authority. It's a tool of trust and intimidation. A simple, get in the car from a police officer is an order, not a request. It could disarm a victim in a way no civilian could. They wouldn't scream, they wouldn't run, they would comply. The killer operated with a kind of confidence that suggested he wasn't afraid of being challenged. Then there was the geography. The killer knew Long Island. Not just the highways and the towns, but the forgotten places. The stretches of road where you can pull over and not be seen. Cops have an intimate knowledge of their beat. They know the dead ends, the unofficial lovers' lanes, the spots where kids go to drink. They know the terrain in a way that a commuter or a tourist never would. The dumping ground on Ocean Parkway felt chosen. It wasn't random, it was a place the killer was comfortable with, a place he knew well. These points alone were enough to make the theory plausible. A killer with forensic awareness, an air of authority, and an intimate knowledge of the area. It all pointed to someone in law enforcement, or at least someone with training. But the theory exploded when the focus shifted from the killer's actions to the actions of the police department investigating him. The Suffolk County Police Department's handling of the Gilgo Beach case was, to put it mildly, a mess. From the outside, it looked like a mix of incompetence, infighting, and something much darker. The department seemed to be at war with itself. They were slow to release information. They refused help from outside agencies, most notably the FBI. For a small-town police department dealing with one of the biggest serial killer cases in recent history, turning down the world's premier investigative agency seemed insane. Unless, of course, you had something to hide. The man at the center of the storm was Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke. Burke was a controversial figure long before the Gilgo case. He was a homegrown cop who rose through the ranks. He was known for his temper and his loyalty to his political patrons. When the Gilgo bodies were discovered, Burke was in charge, and he made a decision that baffled everyone. He kicked the FBI off the case. The official reason was that he didn't trust them, that there were personality conflicts. But to many, it felt like an active attempt to obstruct the investigation. Why wouldn't you want the FBI's resources? Their profilers, their labs, their massive databases. It made no sense. People started asking questions. What was Burke afraid the FBI would find? The story got stranger. It turned out Burke had his own dark secrets. He was eventually arrested and sent to prison, not for anything related to the murders, but for beating up a man who had stolen a duffel bag from his car. The bag reportedly contained pornography and sex toys. During the investigation into that assault, Burke orchestrated a massive cover-up within his own department, pressuring detectives to lie for him. This was the man who was leading the hunt for a serial killer, a man who was himself a corrupt, abusive criminal. The James Burke saga poured fuel on the fire of the police officer theory. The speculation ran wild. Was Burke the killer himself? It seemed unlikely. The timeline didn't quite match up for all the murders. But was he protecting someone? A friend on the force? A fellow officer from his past? His refusal to let the FBI in started to look less like ego and more like a calculated move to keep a secret buried. He was the gatekeeper, and he was keeping the gates locked tight. The department's strange behavior continued. They were slow to test evidence. They publicly dismissed the idea that Shannon Gilbert's death was connected to the other murders, even though her disappearance is what led to their discovery. They ruled her death an accident, a tragic drowning in the marsh, despite her family's insistence that she was murdered. The 911 call she made, which was over 20 minutes long, was kept secret for years. The department fought tooth and nail to keep it from the public. It all felt like more than just bureaucratic foot-dragging. It felt like a cover-up. This is the profiler's nightmare. You build a picture of the killer based on his actions. He is organized, smart, and knows police procedure. Then you look at the police department investigating him. They are disorganized, secretive, and actively blocking the investigation. The two pictures start to merge. The line between the hunter and the hunted blurs. The theory that the killer was a cop wasn't just about the killer's skills. It was about the strange and suspicious behavior of the very people tasked with catching him. For years, this was the narrative. The Long Island serial killer was likely a cop, protected by a corrupt police chief. It explained everything. It explained how he got away with it for so long. It explained the taunting phone calls. It explained the baffling decisions made by the Suffolk County PD. It was a neat, terrifying theory that seemed to fit all the pieces. And then, in the summer of 2023, everything changed. Police arrested a man named Rex Heuermann. He was a 59-year-old architect. He lived in Massapequa Park, a short drive from the dump sites. He was married with 2 children. He worked in Manhattan. He was, on the surface, a normal, boring suburban dad. He was not a cop. The arrest sent a shockwave through everyone who'd followed the case. The police officer theory, which had seemed so solid for so long, appeared to be wrong. Heuermann was charged with the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello. He is the prime suspect in the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. He was linked to the crimes through a stunning piece of police work involving burner phones, cell tower data, a witness statement about his truck, and finally, a DNA match from a pizza crust he threw in the garbage. The new task force that caught him, formed after Burke was long gone, had finally done what should have been done years ago. They went back to the beginning. They looked at the evidence with fresh eyes. They used new technology to connect old dots, and it led them not to a police station, but to an architect's office in Midtown Manhattan. So, was the police officer theory completely wrong? Maybe, and maybe not. Rex Heuermann, the architect, fits the profile of an organized killer perfectly. His profession requires meticulous planning, attention to detail, and an understanding of structures and sites. He lived a double life, a quiet family man at home, and, according to prosecutors, a monster in secret. He allegedly used burner phones with the same precision as the killer in the original profile. He was smart, he was patient, he was forensically aware, he had the same skills a cop might have, but he learned them in a different field. The profile was right about the type of person, but wrong about the profession. The architect theory explains the killer, but it doesn't explain the police department. The arrest of Heuermann doesn't erase the years of suspected incompetence and corruption under James Burke. It doesn't explain why the FBI was kicked off the case, doesn't explain why evidence sat untested for years. It doesn't explain why the department fought so hard to keep the Shannon Gilbert 911 call a secret. This is where the story gets complicated. It's possible there are two separate truths. The first truth is that a man named Rex Heuermann is the Long Island serial killer who murdered the Gilgo Four. The second truth is that the Suffolk County Police Department under James Burke was a corrupt and dysfunctional organization that completely botched the investigation. The two things aren't mutually exclusive. Burke's corruption could have been entirely separate from the murders. His reasons for blocking the FBI could have been to protect himself from his own crimes, not to protect the killer. The bungled investigation might not have been a conspiracy, just a tragic result of a police department run by a paranoid criminal. But there's another possibility, one that keeps the nightmare alive. Heuermann is charged with the murders of the Gilgo Four. But what about the other bodies? The toddler, the Asian man, the woman known as Peaches, and her child. Forensic experts believe it's unlikely one person is responsible for all the bodies found along Ocean Parkway. The area may have been a convenient dumping ground for multiple killers over the years, so could one of them still be a cop? The arrest of Heuermann answers one question, but it leaves many others open. It provides a face for the monster who haunted Long Island for a decade. But it doesn't close the book. The suspicion that hung over the Suffolk County Police Department for so long doesn't just vanish overnight. The damage to their reputation and to the public's trust is immense. The police officer theory was born from a perfect storm of a smart killer and a compromised investigation. The killer's actions made him look like a cop. The cops' actions made them look like they were hiding something. It was a logical conclusion drawn from a set of bizarre and disturbing facts. The fact that an architect was arrested doesn't make the theory foolish. It just shows that the truth is often stranger and more complex than any one theory can contain. The profiler's nightmare isn't just about getting the profile wrong. It's about a case so tangled with corruption and secrets that you can't tell who the real villains are. It's about the chilling realization that even if the killer wasn't a cop, the actions of a corrupt police chief may have helped him stay free for another decade, allowing him to potentially kill again. The monster may not have worn a uniform, but for years the system that was supposed to catch him was run by a man who betrayed his own. And that is its own kind of horror story. The case isn't over. The questions about the other bodies and about what really happened inside that police department remain. The shadow is still there.